as we get closer to open beta launch of Lean-Agile Practitioner Certification at joinagile.com. On this episode, I'd like to actually give you a proper overview of the test and answer the main question. What's in it for you? And why should you bother? Let's get started. Welcome back to the Lean and Mean Agile podcast, everyone. The weeks fly by with absolutely lightning speed over here, and looking back, I frankly have absolutely no idea how I used to find time to release episodes every week. Oh my goodness! These days I personally choose occasional sleep. Yeah. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, as I've seen a rather substantial bump in the numbers of listeners lately, you guys probably drifted over from YouTube. Welcome to you all. I'll reintroduce myself quickly. I'm Dmitry. I'm your Lean Agile coach and fortnightly radio host, if you like, of this predominantly solo show, where I speak about most relevant or interesting topics covering all things related to implementations of lean and agile processes in your evolving and transforming organizations. My audience consists mainly of professionals who are working in delivery of digital and software products, seeking to increase their understanding of fundamental lean agile concepts, as well as getting introduced to some things that they might have heard of, but haven't found a different source that would try and explain those simply and as informally as possible. So this is what we do here in a nutshell, and now that you're properly onboarded, welcome once again. Today I'm revisiting the topic that I've mentioned a few times on the previous episodes and the project basically that I'm working on in my free time. I am developing a new online examination and supporting certification system that I refer to simply as the test often, and it is aimed to put some professionals and lean agile job seekers ahead of the market competition, really. So see, the problem with existing agile certifications and examinations is mostly that those are positioned rather narrowly. Like, for example, about 90% of those rely very heavily on your knowledge of, say, Agile Manifesto and the freely available Scrum Guide. This de facto standard of agile job market and mainly onboarding for different jobs or pre-screening different job candidates, where every second job ad, I suppose, asks their job applicants to have either a PSM or a CSM certification, and you should check my YouTube channel for a video. You will find it pretty easily if you don't know what those things are that I just mentioned. So problem is that that kind of entry point, that entry criteria doesn't work very well as a solid job candidate quality benchmark anymore. Transforming business environments, mostly of larger scale proportions, kind of in Australia, for example, but I hear about similar problems in much smaller scale organizations as well. That transformation is a complex kind of process, and these entities, these organizations are very, very complex usually in their nature. So such a professional who is trying to enter this organization and navigate their way through these traditional legacy processes, at the same time dealing with probably some present desire of senior leadership to implement that mysterious agile, would be rather inefficient. Those people would be inefficient or taking very, very long time to get their head in the game. That's very, very different from recommendations and pretty pictures painted by the freely accessible Scrum Guide. So that is why, if you rely on looking at those kind of qualifications by the job candidates that are trying to get those jobs and enter these companies and try to make a difference there, they are rather meaningless. You know, that's the issue. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing particular, especially some of my preferred certifications or even the Scrum Guide. That would be a heresy in our world. I'm just pointing out the rather obvious fact that freshly baked Scrum Masters who obtained their CSM or even a much tougher online certification, which is PSM, Professional Scrum Master, will not bring much value to the hiring organization in majority of cases unless they have solid proof of exposure to real-life scenarios and practical implementations of those agile processes. Issue is, we have very limited avenues to demonstrate that practical knowledge to the hiring company, especially considering that the recruitment agencies or the HR of the actual hiring company, they receive tons and tons of professional resumes from different people who would like a job, So this is where we are kind of starting to see this gap, where we do not have a reliable benchmark and reliable kind of way to make a statement that we are worth our money. Until usually we start talking to the hiring panel, for example, at the interviews, but not all of us get through, right? So this is where the issue and frustration often comes from. And I'm not even talking about, I'm mentioning Agile, for example, right? I'm not even talking much about Lean per se, because from my experience working with companies, talking to a lot of individuals, not many people out there actually properly even understand what a Lean Kanban is, and beyond, a board full of sticky notes and some to-do, doing, done process mapped on it, and how to implement it and when to recommend using it. And I found that this is a tremendously useful, very underutilized, yet very welcome thing when you start explaining it properly to people. So we kind of, I think another gap here is identifying people who have that knowledge and who can practically use these kind of skills in the new organization that would prefer them to some other candidates who do not have that knowledge. Okay. So everyone seems to be a Scrum expert these days, aren't they? Again, nothing is wrong with that, and I had to learn and get Scrum certification for myself in the past just to better compete on paper with the other candidates. Problem is, it was a while ago, and that is when it was okay, it was sufficient. But the world is very rapidly changing around us. So to summarize this harsh bottom line, I would say that showing CSM or PSM certification alone just doesn't cut it anymore in many cases. And I regularly also speak with very respectable agile coaches from leading agile consultancies in Australia who, for example, tell me things along the lines of, we were just about to hire a bunch of new agile people and you should have seen the quality of candidates that we got from the street. And a day of our time kind of just interviewing them and just rolling our eyes, for the lack of a better word, was wasted, completely wasted. If you are exposed to recruitment of professionals, probably in any industry, but I'll stick to lean and agile jobs because that's what I know, you probably had similar experiences as well, or at least know someone who was on the receiving end of it. At the same time, there is opposite side of this coin, the actual professionals who know their stuff, but who have to go through those really outdated filters of recruitment process where they have no leverage, as I mentioned kind of briefly just before, or particular springboard, if you like, where they could assert themselves in the eyes of hiring people who don't know them, that they really are worthy of attention, that they really know their stuff. And yes, it all can come down to luck and way too often and face-to-face conversations, of course, at the interviews where good professionals get their chance to shine. But the problem remains that a lot of those people who are actually still good, they simply don't get a chance for the interview because, I don't know, a less educated recruiter didn't see some particular abbreviation or a term on their professional resume and didn't let them through. Anyway, it's an endless topic, as you can see, and I am passionate about it because I've been on both sides of this market, candidate versus recruiter barricade. I hope this long scene setting at the very least does one job well, and it explains what drove me to the point of deciding to create this new online examination and supporting certification for fellow professionals. Current pilot term that is in the process of being reviewed as a trademark is Lean-Agile Certified Practitioner, LACP. Being agile and generally a real person who deals with these matters every day, I know that the only actual vote that really matters for something like this certification is acceptance and endorsement by the fellow Lean-Agile practitioners who know their stuff. I'm talking about people who I know personally, who I worked with, who have a footprint in this world kind of as Lean Agile coaches. And I do know quite a few people, or generally those who are willing to participate and prove their worth. And all the other kind of governmental paperwork, fees, and receiving some tick that it is now a nationally accredited certification comes very, very secondary in my opinion. And it's not my focus right now, because I would lose momentum and I would lose a lot of time if that was my primary pursuit and the content and the value of this certification and the meaning of this certification would come second. So instead what I do is I work on creating a really tough but relevant test that will make sure that the candidate knows Scrum, Kanban, Core Agile, and main and most relevant lean thinking principles. The test is also full of behavioral questions that are designed to push candidates' limits in time management, because they are very conservatively timed, those questions, and simply detecting a deliberately confusing answer that I almost always have plotted somewhere in there. So the candidate needs to show ability to see past it and pick a better one. I do not kind of want to scare you too much, because it is certainly not a very entry-level perhaps thing, but it is testing a breadth of fundamental knowledge and that you are worth your money, ultimately. That is what the test is there to check, and ultimately I don't want to make any excuses for how hard it is. It's intended to be hard. It's impossible to describe the test like this, of course, verbally or in writing, which I try to do anyway on the website on joinagile.com, that you can go to and kind of try and comprehend this after listening to me. Maybe this might help as well. Instead, what I've prepared is open test that will launch on the website early next week. Possibly at the moment when you're listening to this, depending on when you got to this episode, it probably is already launched, so you should check joinagile.com for the open test. And its main purpose is to give you a feel for how the real test will go. Anyone can try open test. Of course, you should be some sort of an agile professional, otherwise it would make very little sense to you, but it is very freely accessible and everyone is welcome. The open test consists only of 10 static questions, which means that they don't change. A real test currently is aimed to have 40 random questions from Join Agile database that has a lot more questions in it. I'll tell you right now that open test is much, much easier than the real test. Some questions might read as rather tricky, but that's again deliberately there to give you an idea of what to expect from the real test. Except in the real test, there'll be a lot more of that confusion, pressure, time pressure, seemingly okay, acceptable answers that are incorrect, and so on. If you've done some of the harder online examinations, tests, multi-choice kind of questionnaires and that kind of stuff, you probably are not completely unfamiliar with the pressure that this can put on you if it's done right. And I certainly want to create something that will be worth for you passing and adding to your resume. So that is the idea here once again. I personally can't wait for you to try open test and start providing feedback. Everyone is invited. Currently, both open and real tests are in what is called FNF. It's a friends and family alpha testing. It's a closed invitations only. And feedback that I'm receiving is quite constructive and very, very good. I'm iterating on the content. I'm changing a lot of stuff. I'm still playing with the timing that I'm allowing to pass the real test. So the feedback that you could provide on the open test would be very helpful. Of course, it won't be 100% accurate because it's different from the real test, of course, but it is still exposing mechanics of the test, how it works. You would still be able to provide quite a bit of valuable information to me if you choose to do so. So what about the timing of the launch surrounding the real test then? Well, look, launching it is probably at least another month away, I'm thinking, because I'm still polishing a few parts there, but I am an agile practitioner and individual, so I'm not trying to make it perfect. As you can see with the open test launch, for example, some things are not super perfect with open test either, but I'm seeking early feedback as early as possible while I can pivot and I have control over this situation. After all, this will help us kind of differentiate ourselves as Lean Agile professionals worth our money from those who didn't bother doing anything after getting those CSM or PSM certifications or some others 5 or so years ago. So that is why I cannot overemphasize what motivates me to get early feedback, improve it as much as possible, throw it at the masses, promote it further, make sure that people start using it. In the further kind of spirit of transparency here, so that you understand what else I'm doing, I'm talking to a few fellow recruitment agencies about piloting this test in Australia, and certification will be used as part of their candidate pre-filtering process. This is in negotiation. There is no timing on this. I will not announce what agencies currently are supporting this, but there is certainly a lot of work being put into this, and it is not just some, solo dude talking about this. You will hear about this. Early adoption is certainly going to reward you. How to access the real test once real test becomes available, I am still working out these details. At the moment, access will be free, but by invitation. So I'm not going to be selling access codes just yet. Yes, you will need a unique access code to see the test, but I'm still working out kind of a few details here as to how I'm going to go about this. I will be distributing the access codes for the real test on this podcast. Well, naturally, you can expect that, can't you? On the YouTube channel, as well as by posting some promotional posts with codes on LinkedIn and possibly even Twitter. So if you're interested to jump in early, definitely stay tuned and, check joinagile.com, of course, for updates, because that's where the whole thing is hosted. That's where the updates will happen. And that is it for today, my friends. As you can see, I'm super excited. I truly believe in this initiative, and I see it as a worthy investment of time and effort for early adopters, professionals who want to distinguish themselves from the crowd. I will leave you with this kind of analogy, I suppose, that I choose to see it this way. I think that this is like buying a promising stock or, say, cryptocurrency before it skyrockets, okay? I choose to see it that way, and I am certainly making everything to make it happen exactly that way. So come play, okay? Thanks everyone for tuning in again this week. Your feedback, questions, content requests are most welcome. My email is podcast@joinagile.com, and you can still send me messages on LinkedIn. That majority of listeners so far seem to prefer to emailing. I guess email is dying as a legacy tool and the method. Okay, I'm not gonna stop you. So that's fine. You can find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. That is fine. Stay safe, have fun in the meantime, and I will talk to you in 2 weeks.